All right, welcome back to Choosing Us. We have a special guest couple today that we are so excited about.
We love them. This is Cole and Sanja Hatter. So to take you guys back a little bit on how we met, I actually met Cole, he probably doesn't remember this, during the first elevator nights here in Utah. He flew in to check an Everbowl and spoke about a thing called a for-purpose business, and then got off the stage and said, I need to run home because I'm late for my flight. And I didn't get to talk to him. And so I said, I need to create a way to become friends with that dude, because that dude and I see things very, very similarly. And fast forward a couple of years, had the opportunity to go to Mexico with Cole and Sanja and serve at their orphanage, which we'll get to. We have followed their journey for quite some time and really look up to them, how they do things, and the nuances that they have incorporated into their world, into their relationship that made them where they are today. So without further ado, Cole and Sanja, welcome to Choosing Us.
Thanks for having us, guys. I remember that event. I don't remember having a quick chat with you, but you know how events are. You meet 45 people in 10 minutes.
We didn't chat. You ran.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I remember that but my first memory where you stand out and went from just someone in my circle to someone who I had, what would you call an affection towards was at Mexico. Quick backstory. There's this guy named Andy Frisella. He has this program called 75 Hard. And by complete coincidence, my wife and Brad were doing 75 Hard at the same time, which requires 2 45-minute workouts. One of them needs to be outside. And we had spent the entire day serving at the orphanage. It was like 9 o'clock at night and we're in Mexico. It's dark and we were in a safe place at a great hotel. But my wife's like, I got to go do my outdoor workout. And I was like, okay, you have to stay here in the harbor because from our hotel balcony, I can stand here and watch you the whole time to make sure that you're safe. Well, by coincidence, Brad was out there at the same time and decided to, no offense to my wife, but slow his pace down and walk about 20 feet behind her. And Brad's a big dude. And you might have even been bigger then, because I just remember this huge man walking 15 feet behind my wife for 45 straight minutes, to the point where I didn't feel like I needed to check on her anymore. I came out to the patio every 5 or 6 minutes just to make sure you guys were good. And you had her back the whole time. And I was like, dude, this guy's rad that he's working security right now for my wife. And we talk about that story a lot, actually. And so that was my first big impression of you outside of, the few conversations we had before that moment. And so love your heart. Love that you had my wife's back, and love that story that you guys were out there getting your steps together and being faithful to the program of 75 Hard.
But the best part is he didn't tell me at first that he was my bodyguard. He just saw that it was dark and he's just walking behind me, and he had these little stretchers, and he kept getting closer, and I'd go farther, and he's like, hey, I just wanted to tell you that I'm here if you need anything. I didn't want to be you get all creeped out that I'm following you, but I'm here to make sure you're okay. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the best. Cole's up there on the balcony. I don't know what he thinks he would do if something happened to me, because he'd have to jump 5?
Yeah, 5 stories.
Yeah,
I would have jumped 5 stories for you.
And I'm so I'm grateful you're here. And then we just kind of did our workout, and I was I just felt safe, and so thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm sure the sight from Cole's perspective was funny. What I was doing was I had resistance bands, and I was doing chest flies with my resistance bands while I was walking.
Yeah. That makes sense, because your arms were way out. This guy's
I was doing
massive.
resistance flies with my resistance band. I'm sure that looked hilarious.
Yeah, well, that explains why the arms were so out. But anyway, I'll never forget that. We still talk about it to this day. We were at that hotel recently, and I was like, remember that one time you and Brad?
Every time we go, we say it.
Yeah.
Do you remember when Brad was making sure you were safe? I'm like, I know.
Yeah,
so thoughtful.
So
you just got to take him on every trip with you. Just hire your own personal bodyguard. He'll follow you everywhere.
We invited you both to the next one, but you have a date conflict, unfortunately.
Yeah. We do.
It's actually coming up in 3 weeks, as a matter of fact.
It's our 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, wow. I know. I love
Congrats.
it. Congrats.
At the next one, invite us again, and we'll be there. I want to come so bad. I've heard all the stories and how incredible it is. So
yeah, it's a special. We bring one group down a year. We go 10 times a year, but we bring a group with us once a year. And so yeah, sometime next year we'll plan another one.
So let's talk about the orphanage a little bit. Let's go way back when you first were with YWAM, and you left California and went to Mexico. That all started. You guys were dating, weren't you?
Sort of. She dumped me, and that's what motivated me to go. So at that point, we had been together for about November. So for about 15 or so months, a little over a year, that she and I had been dating. And, I had a history of loss, of bad relationships, of losing people I loved in accidents, and of people leaving. And so as kind of a defense mechanism, which is unhealthy, but I've obviously worked through it, I decided that I would never allow anybody into my innermost circle of relationships anymore, if that makes sense. That, like, my mom, my dad, my sisters, like, they're all in there already, but I'm not going to add anyone else that close or to love that deeply, because they're all, as horrible as it sounds, they're all either dying or leaving or whatever. And so I didn't want to open my heart up to another person to have the ability to hurt me that deeply. And so when she and I first started dating, I told her that. I was like, hey, listen, I will never cheat on you. I'll be faithful to you, but I'll never marry you, because I don't want a wife and children someday, because I'm convinced that they'll get in a car accident and be taken from me. And I can't. So we'll date. I'll be faithful. And this was our very first date. And she was like, whoa, pump the brakes. Why are we talking marriage, right? Like, calm yourself down. And I was like, hey, I feel like transparency is important. So fast forward 15 months, we were monogamous. We weren't like dating other people. And again, had a great little relationship. We were in our early 20s, 24 and 25. And then she pulls me aside on Cinco de Mayo and says, hey, I just need a quick update, a quick check-in. We weren't fighting. Our relationship at that time was, going great. Again, dating. And she's like, you've been upfront with me as to the fact that you'll never get married and why you'll never marry somebody. And I can appreciate that, what you've gone through. But I just want an update. Has anything changed? And she's like, I'm not asking if you would marry me personally, but would you marry anybody? Like, is marriage even in your future at all? And, I could tell what she was fishing for. And I knew that I could give her a very simple answer and be like, yeah. Someday I'm sure I'll turn the corner. But I respected her enough to be honest with her. And so I'm in the passenger seat of her car. She's in the driver's seat of her car. And we're kind of, leaning towards each other in the car with the doors closed. And I just looked at her and I said, nothing's changed. I think you're great. I'll be faithful to you forever, but we'll never get married. We'll never take that step. And it's nothing personal. I won't marry anybody. And she got a little emotional. And she told me for one of the first times, she's like, well, I love you. And she's like, again, something along the lines of that she respects that still. But then I'll never forget the word she said next. She said, but if you can't, it gets me emotional, but she says, if you can't love me the way I deserve to be loved, you can't have me anymore. Get out of my car. And I'm like, what? And that was it. And she was like, she's like, I don't need a proposal. She's like, I remember this. She's like, I don't need a ring. But if you will never marry me, then you can't be a part of my life anymore. If you can't love me the way I deserve to be loved, you can't have me. Get out. And that was it. And she dumped me and drove out of my life. And
because why continue to make memories and fall deeper in love and just do that? It's like at the end of it to just walk away. And I knew that I wanted to get married, have kids, have the American dream, and I just, if it didn't work out, I'm not like one of my girlfriends, she's been with her boyfriend for 7 years at the time. And she's like, I'm just going to wait and wait. And I'm like, okay, you can do that. That works for you. But for me, it's too painful for me to make more joyful memories to know that it comes to an end.
Yeah. And so she dumped me. That was on Cinco de Mayo, which is so un-American to dump me on a Mexican holiday. Like, it was pretty low. And then I ended up moving to Mexico June 1st. So part of the backstory was I had told her that I wanted to be kind of a nomad, and that I was super interested in missions work. I was a Christian at the time. She wasn't at the time. And so I was like, I kind of feel like the future that God has for me is traveling around doing missions work and maybe owning a business too, because I was a business owner at the time. But kind of my goal was to just do that. She's like, hey, that's noble and that's a great cause, but that's not my future. I want to have a home base. I want to have a house. I want my kids to go to school, and we could take family trips to give back, but I don't want to like live on the road. So that was one of our biggest like divides in our early relationship of why it ended up falling apart. And so long story short, once that relationship ended, I didn't want to have to keep running into her because we have all the same friends. And I felt like I had my chance before, life or whatever got too busy. So I moved literally like 20 days later to Mexico to join YWAM, as you said, became a missionary, lived down there for about 8 months as a full-time missionary, right? Like that was my job and my 9 to 5. And then while I was down there in that season, ended up helping start the orphanage that we still have to this day. But the biggest reason I went to Mexico was because she dumped me. And I was like, all right, well then freaking A, if I've got, my business was failing too at the time. This was 2010. I was a real estate investor. I lost almost everything because of the recession. If anyone remembers the recession of 2008 and 9, by 2010, I'd lost almost everything. So I was like, business sucks. Girlfriend dumped me. I'm out of here. Like, if I can't make money and don't have a girlfriend anymore, I might as well just go to Mexico and tell people about Jesus. And so that's what I did, and lived down there for 8 months.
That's a wild ride.
Wow.
That is a wild ride indeed. Sanja, what was your perspective on all this? You mentioned a little bit, but
I was heartbroken. I'm going out to go hang out with him on Cinco de Mayo. Did not think we were breaking up. I thought for sure he'd be like, yeah, one day I'll get married. But like when I'm 30 or 35 or 40, like I just thought it would just be way far down the line because I didn't see myself getting married anytime soon either. And so I was like, just expected him to say, yeah, you know what? I've been with her for 15 months. Like maybe I'm more open to one day being married very far from now. I just expected a yes. And he said no. And I'm like, what? I'm like, this is it. I need to walk away right now. I'm not the type of person that like drags things out. I just got to cut it off, you know, not like, I just needed to rip off the Band-Aid. And so I just said it. I couldn't believe I said it. And then I drove home and my friends are like, what are you doing here? And I'm bawling. And they're like, what just happened? I'm like, I just broke up with Cole. They're like, you love him. I'm like, I know, none of this makes sense. And yeah, I was devastated. I all I did was think about him while he moved to Mexico. I was bummed I wouldn't run into him because I thought for sure maybe we'd like see each other. And then he'd be like, you know what? I'm so dumb. Of course, one day I'll get married. But when I said that in the car, a lot of girls have told me when they heard the story that they want to give their significant other an ultimatum of getting married. I'm like, no, you guys, I didn't say like, if you don't marry me, we're done. I wanted to just know that there was a future together. And he said no, and I'm not going to just wait along and see like what he decides later. I love that he was honest with me, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm grateful that I did it. Because then we both realized what we needed. And during that time that he was gone in Mexico, we're able to grow. And then, you know, he proposed to me. He didn't even ask me to be his girlfriend. I thought I was going on a girls' trip to just go have fun in Catalina. And I got off a boat and there he is with a poster. And he's just like, I love you. And I'm all, what is happening? And I left with the girls' trip, came back home, and everyone's like, wait, you're engaged to who? and that's how we got married.
That's one of the best parts of our story.
He's like, why am I going to date you? I already know who you are. I just needed to grow, and I needed to go to Mexico to do this.
It had been 10 months. So she dumped me. Like I said, I don't know how much of the story you want to hear, but stop us.
You're good.
Stop us
You're
anytime.
good. It's a fun story.
But yeah, so she dumps me. Like I said, I spent 8 months in Mexico and then was invited to go to Thailand for 6 weeks to work with women and children who are victims of human trafficking, not through YWAM, but someone who used to be a YWAM-based director and then went and started his own nonprofit working with these women and children. And so through the grapevine, I end up getting invited out there. And so immediately went from Mexico to Thailand. And so by the time I got back from Thailand, it had been 10 months. And, you know, part of my experience down in Mexico was getting healing in the areas I needed to heal, recommitting my life and like reestablishing my faith with God. She ended up, becoming a Christian in that time when I was down there, because again, she was on her own journey, on her own timeline, and in her own way started like secretly bought a Bible and like secretly started like trying out churches. And while I was in Mexico, not knowing any of this was happening. And so long story short, I knew in like December, I moved in June. I knew in like December, I was going to marry her, came home in March. And like she said, planned this great trip. She thought it was just her and her girlfriends. I obviously told the girlfriends to bring her out there, but didn't tell them why. They weren't really happy with me because I was the dude that she dumped 10 months earlier. And I was like, I promise you, it's going to be okay. Just get her in the right place at the right time. And she came out to where I needed her to be. I had everything set up, went down on the beach a few hours later and took a knee and asked her to marry me. And again, she had dumped me 10 months earlier. There was no boyfriend, girlfriend in the middle. I just, in my proposal, told her like, I don't know why this gets me so emotional still, but I was just like, dude, like you're the one. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I've healed and God has restored my heart and I am ready for marriage and I am ready to spend the rest of my life. And I don't want it to be with anybody but you. And so even though we're not dating, will you marry me? And I'd already asked her parents for permission. She didn't know that. And I got their blessing.
I thought he was in Thailand. I didn't even know he secretly went to my parents' house. Like,
yeah. She still thought, because we lived in such tight knit circles, she had heard about a lot of like my travels. And so she knew I was in Thailand and assumed I was still there. I actually came home like on a Monday and proposed to her like on a Thursday or whatever. Like it was like I had just gotten home from Thailand. But then anyway, I asked her to marry me and she said, heck yes. Not just yes, but heck yes. And then she was so excited for marriage. We got married 4.5 months later.
Wow.
And got pregnant like 3 months after that. So life went quick.
But that's when people are like, I'm going to give my boyfriend an ultimatum. I'm like, no, I walked away thinking it was done. Like you can't go in thinking if I do this, maybe then I can like manipulate him into doing it. I'm like, who wants to get engaged or married like that? I didn't want that. So I loved that I broke up with him. It was done. We weren't speaking. He went there. He saw other couples. You know, he saw how hard they worked at their marriage. And he's like, look, this works. Like he had healing watching other couples. And so when he decided to propose to me and I was like, what if I had a boyfriend? You asked to marry me. I could have been dating someone. He was like, I didn't care.
Yeah, I would have called them and had you break up with them on the phone so that we could continue the proposal. But yeah, I guess the point she's making is a good teaching lesson. You know, we've been kind of storytelling, but that's one of the reasons that I knew God put on my heart to marry Sanja was even though the breakup sucked at the time, by like December, 6 months later, I had the perspective of saying, here's a woman who has character, who has integrity, who isn't willing to compromise her value system. And even though I got the bad end of the stick, what she demonstrated is that she's the type of woman that when there's a line in the sand or a boundary drawn, she will not compromise and will not break. And that's the type of woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. And that's the type of woman I want to raise my babies. And should God give me daughters, that's the type of woman I want my daughters to become so that they don't get stepped on, they don't get walked on, they don't compromise. They have values and they stand by them because like she said, she didn't want to break up with me. We were doing great. And like we weren't deteriorating. Like it was in the middle of maybe our best month of the 15 months we'd been together and just out of nowhere dumps me because as she communicated, she knew she deserved better. And so it took me 6 months to have that perspective. But then that was one of the number one reasons that I fell so hard in love with her and decided to propose to her was I said, like, this is a woman who has character and integrity. And sadly, those aren't, common character traits in many people today. And you can't teach that, right? Like she's got it. And so besides the fact that she's super sexy and all the other perks, that was one of the big things that I was like, dude, this is someone who has the quality of life partnership for sure.
Well, and I think that's so cool. And I was going to touch on that too, that for you, especially people listening to this who are dating and going through that, you setting your boundary is huge. I feel like so many people, they kind of let it go because they love them. They don't want to lose them. But for you to be strong and be like, this is my boundary, this is what I'm setting, and not putting an ultimatum on him, but saying, this is what is important to me. And if you don't agree, then this isn't going to work. Yeah. That's important for so many couples. I feel like they need to set their boundaries immediately or before you get into the relationship so that as you go into these relationships that you know where that line is. And then also not trying to change your partner. I feel like so many people, they're like, oh, they'll change for me. They'll change over time. You said 15 months later, he still hadn't changed. And so people are like, oh, one day he'll change. You can't change your partner. Totally. You can be who you are and stand for who you are, but then you have to accept your partner for where they're at. And if that's not going to work for you, then you need to go your separate ways. And that's really cool that you were able to take that break and figure out what you really wanted and come back and say, this is it. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. You articulated that perfectly. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Boundaries are key, I think, in a relationship. I'm always willing, and like in marriage, there's so much compromise. Obviously, you're not going to be like this or that's it. But on very large issues, it's like he knows where I stand on certain things and I know where he stands. And it's like we don't cross that so that we can be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I feel like you also set those boundaries and you set that before you got married, right? You had those conversations. Cole, like you said, you knew all these traits about her that you wanted in a wife and in a mother. And I feel like so many people get married because they're focused on the love and the lust
Yeah.
and that side of it, that they don't even look at the other side that you brought up, that how are they going to be as a wife? How are they going to be as a mother? What kind of traits do I want my kids to take from them? Those things are really, really important to even think about and discuss before getting to the point of marriage.
And
Absolutely.
also, when you have kids, then you have to set new boundaries. Like, as we have been together now all these years, we've grown also. So we have to set new boundaries, and so that we don't resent each other or get angry for things. I assumed that he could read my mind, apparently. Like, when we got a therapist, I'd be like, but how does he not know? She's like, did you say this? And I'm like, well, no, but shouldn't he just know? And she's like, no, that doesn't work like that. So being able to establish new boundaries and say them, he knows, and then carry on.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome that you guys had a therapist. That is something that we find is very, very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
There's this nuance that you only go to see a therapist when you are broken versus you are progressively getting better.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you stated early on, basically first date, you had the hard conversations. You opened the relationship with true, transparent honesty. And with that honesty came hardship. But that hardship brought out true beauty. And it's so cool to see this progression through trial getting to where you are today. End of the story. Fun fact, they get married, they remain the same, and they grow together. But how cool that is. And you made mention, Sanja, you dated Christianity while he was gone. Cole already was a Christian. We know, and as you've mentioned, God plays a huge role in your guys' life. How has that benefited and directed your relationship?
Man, interesting timing on this. So she and I have been together for 15 years now. Married for how long?
13.
Good job. It's funny when it comes to like anniversaries and dates, it's the stereotype is the girl knows it all and the boy forgets. Like, it's the opposite. I have to remind her even when her birthday is and how old she is. She celebrated the same birthday like 3 years in a row. So anyway, we've been married 13 years, together 15. And God was a part, if we're just being honest, God was a part of our relationship and of our marriage, but wasn't a center until really now. She and I would oscillate back and forth as being the spiritual leader of the household, even though I'm the man and biblically should have been all along. As you know, Brad, and maybe your listeners know my story or don't, God blessed me substantially in business. And from 2012, when I basically we got married in 2011 in November, but like starting in January of 2012, I started making stupid amounts of money and made tens of millions of dollars ever since. Like, God turned on a switch. I was missionary, came home, and God blessed me so that I could bless others. That's the whole make money matter thing that my shirt's about. And you remember that story down there, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
And always went to church, always tithed, always, would give God credit and all that stuff. But honestly, would only like pray and have a relationship with God like before a meal. Like, oh, dear God, thanks for this food. Help to nourish by his amen. Or like before a big event. But like I was so comfortable and successful financially that like I didn't really need God, as horrible as that sounds. And so he was just there. I would on stage, openly say, I'm a Christian, I believe in God. And again, I would go to church out of 52 weekends, at least 45 of them, right? Like I was playing the part.
Paid the dues.
I was playing the part. And if you had asked me about my faith in 2020 or even 2 years ago, I would have told you like things are great. Yeah. And she's a believer and, our kids are growing up in the church. But then things changed. And being very transparent with your audience, I invested so I'm an investor and made the majority of my money in investing, and risk big, win big. As I've progressed as an investor, I made some of the largest investments of my entire life in the last 24 months. We're talking multiple seven figures. And without getting into the details, the majority of that was into other people's companies, private equity, and some of that was into our own real estate portfolio. And long story short, all of those millions of dollars are gone. These companies that I invested in, which we don't need to talk about the names on the air, all went to zero or lost my money. And so it's not like, hey, Cole, your $250,000 is now worth $100,000. It's, hey, Cole, your $250,000 is zero. Sorry, we're out of business. And so we've been in a crazy season of, praise God, as far as our lifestyle and paying the bills, we're fine. But all of the wealth that I had amassed over this last decade and was diligent in, I wasn't buying cars. I do have cars, but I wasn't frivolously buying cars. I wasn't gambling. I didn't have an addiction problem. I was being wise and invested like I was supposed to and like I teach people to, but I made the wrong choices and we lost a ton. And we were in a crazy season. 2023, we lost 500 times more money than the average American makes each year. It's hard to explain how much money we lost in 2023. And again, praise God, we were always able to provide for ourselves. This was our investment money that was going away. Okay. But it was hard for me to watch because I had worked a decade to create that money to then watch it go, largely because of other people's negligence and laziness and misappropriation and things like that. So long story short, I got bitter at God. And I was like, why are you doing this? And why are you taking all this? And, I would still go to church and still pray, but my attitude towards God was one of blame. And I was like, it's your fault that you're not stepping in and fixing this. And these are bad people. One of them was in the middle of a divorce because he'd been having an affair on his wife for 4 years. And he gets all these millions of my dollars. And now I'm out and he's a bad person. God, why would you bless him and not me? So anyway, long story short, it was a rough season for me and God. And it culminated to this awesome, I love telling the story, this awesome moment that I had with Sanja just this last February. So 4 months ago now. And it was my daughter's birthday party. And all week long, the forecast had called for sunny skies and low 70s, and it was going to be perfect. And the day before, all of a sudden out of nowhere, rain clouds, right? And it poured. Her party was on a Sunday. It poured rain all day Saturday. But the forecast still said that it would be a cloudy but not rainy day Sunday. And I was like, all right, we're not going to have the sunshine, but at least things will be dry. Long story short, guess what happened? Her party started at 11:30 and it rained until 10 a.m. And so my assistant and I, there would be a quick gap in the rain. I'll speed the story up. And so we'd go out there and we'd set up the placemats because our party was indoor, outdoor. We'd set up the tablecloths, the placemat, and then it would pour rain. So I'm literally out there with a leaf blower trying to dry everything off before our guests start arriving. And I was having some choice words with God and I was yelling and I was like, bah! And it hurt her. And the way that Sanja processes is she retracts. She's an introvert. She's not an introvert, but she's an internal processor. If I have a problem, I'm going to sit you down and make you fix it with me right now because I can't handle 15 minutes of discomfort. If you bother her, she'll talk to you in a month, right? And so the party starts. Thank God the rain clears. We had to make a lot of adjustments. A lot of things were still wet. The whole ground was wet, so everyone's tracking water through my house. They go outside, come back in. It was a mess. There was mud in my house, but it was whatever. But I could tell that I'd pissed her off and she was faking the smile and faking her bubbly attitude with our guests. So I was like, I got to fix this because her only memory of this party is going to be me freaking out. And so I pulled her into the laundry room and I was like, Sanja, I'm sorry. I crossed the line. I was yelling. I was pissed at the rain. I was pissed at the circumstances. You understand it's just because I wanted it to be a perfect party for our daughter. And we've spent a lot of money on this party, over $10,000, at least what she admitted to, maybe more.
Oh my gosh.
And so I wanted it to be perfect for our baby. So I'm not just trying to be a jerk. I was really sad for Eliana, our daughter. And Sanja communicated to me in a way that she never has before. And she was calm and collected and just used these words that pierced my heart. And we talked for about 5 minutes and it ended up awesome. We had this beautiful embrace and this kiss and she immediately turned to the corner and was herself again. And like, we had a great rest of the party. But the two main points she made was, number one, and this one is hard to admit, but she said, you were literally yelling about rain. And she's like, weather, rain set you off. She's like, I need to know that you're man enough to handle hard things in life. What if one of us gets a disease? What if one of us gets cancer? She's like, what if something happens to one of our kids and you can't even handle rain? And I was like, oh, but she didn't say it in like a condescending way. She said it in like the most loving way of like accountability. And she's like, I need to know that we have so much life ahead of us. There will be really hard things we face. I need to know that I have a man that can handle hard things in life. And today you were dropping F-bombs in the backyard and freaking out about rain. And like, it pierced my heart. And then she addressed my relationship with God directly, because I had been transparent with her. And basically, while I was mad at God, I told her I wasn't going to pray anymore. I was like, what's the point of praying? Nothing changes. I pray to fix the land deal. I pray to fix this deal. Nothing ever gets fixed. I'm not praying anymore. Like, just gratitude. I'll be like, thank you for my kids. Amen. But I'm never ever going to ask God for another thing. It's basically where I decided and where I lived for like a year. I still believed in God and all of that. But I was like, I'm not asking for anything anymore, because I feel like an idiot asking for anything because he won't say yes to any of it, you know? And so I'll just say, God, thanks for the food. Thanks for the weather. Thanks for my children. Amen. And so she then said the second part in the laundry room, and she said, I respect that you're on your own journey with God. And she said, I'm on mine. And she said, nothing you ever say or do will ever come between me and my relationship with God and what I believe. And she's like, I just want you to know that I'm going to give you space to be on your own journey. I'm not going to tell you how you should act or what you should say, but like, I'm rooting for you as your wife. And just know that when you freak out like you did today and all that stuff, nothing you ever say or do will ever come between me and God and my relationship with him. And as far as your relationship with him, I'll give you the space to be on your own journey, like, but I'm rooting for you. And then she like turned around and walked out. And like, I was just in there like crushed in the best possible way for like 10 minutes by myself in the laundry room. And then I found her in the backyard and I was like, thank you. And like, she could see it in my eyes, and like, we were great. And from that moment, I reconnected with God in a way, and I'm on so fire right now with my relationship with him that like, for the first time in our marriage, God is the center. Like right now we're on a fast. We are literally fasting today by just complete coincidence that this podcast was today, because we have a big weekend, business weekend. We're actually hopping on a plane in like 11 hours to fly to Miami, and we're fasting and praying that God will make amazing things happen, relationships happen, conversations happen, so that we get the most ROI out of this trip to Miami that we're taking for business. It's not, pleasure, it's a business trip. And so like, we're fasting together, we're praying together, and like, we were already doing really well. Even though I was kind of floundering with God for the last year, she and my relationship became even more solid than it had ever been because of the financial struggles we faced. And again, it's my investment money that's going away. Like I've, said, like our mortgage is paid, we're fine. But like, watching millions of dollars just go out the door was hard for me and her. But it like galvanized our relationship. So like, if you would have asked me last August how our marriage was doing, I would have told you we're in the best season of our entire life. Like, we are in the best, and we really were, which I think is what gave her the confidence to have that direct of a conversation with me in February, because other than God, she and I were the best we'd ever been. And since then, which is still like, we're only 100 days into this, like, it has completely changed our relationship. We were the best we'd ever been that day, but compared to now, I would never even want to go back to then. And I've only had a chance to tell this story in like very small circles of very intimate friends, and now we're telling it to the internet. But like, it was a radical transformation that God did in my heart, and like significant things have changed in my life internally and externally as a result of that. And I can say now I am the spiritual leader of the house. She was like the catalyst. She was the one that called me to the mat. But like, now I am like working to be the man that she can trust to handle anything life or God gives me, sickness, disease, whatever, our kids getting hurt at school or something, like that, I will be her rock going forward. And again, just the amount of prayer that I have every day now about everything is more than it ever was, even when I was a missionary. And so, long answer. You probably hope you didn't ask that question, but like,
I love
how has it worked out for God to be in our relationship? Honestly, like the first 12 years of our marriage, God was a part of it. Like, we went to church on Sunday, tithed, and like prayed before we ate dinner. But like, honestly, God is the center of it now. And it's radically different between the two of us. And that's part of what you guys saw at Limitless, of us praying before I go on stage. Like, we are just like so much more of a unit now. Like, we were already, but we are so much like closer and tighter as like in us, even though she has her own self with her own ideas and individuality, and so am I. But like, again, I keep using the word galvanized, like the galvanization of like our hearts in these last few months is something that is hard to articulate, and something that I hope every one of your listeners can find in their own way, in their own stories and their own journeys, because like life's better this way.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners. I feel like they needed to hear that today. And one thing that I got from that too was how strong your wife is.
Oh,
how
for sure.
incredible she is. And one thing that I feel like people don't always do that I love that you did is a lot of times people wait till after the situation to address the problem, because you could have said, oh, let's wait till the party's over, then we'll have a conversation. But that doesn't work. That doesn't work, especially when you're in the situation. You got to have the conversations right away, go to the side, have the conversation and fix it. Because if you would have waited until after the party, until after everything was done, at the party, you would have been in a grumpy mood. It wouldn't have gone the way you wanted it to. Your mindset would have been in a different space. So the fact that even though you were in the middle of a birthday party, you went into a private area, you had the conversation right away, and then it changed the entire projection of the rest of the day, and how important that is.
Yeah. And we had like 150 people at the house, and we just like stepped out. But I'm glad you said that, because that's very much my style. She's the one that's like, talk to me next week.
But I went to therapy for that and got better. So I would tell him, so our therapist, here's a little nugget for you. For me, like you said, I like to not talk for days and just kind of brush it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Or I just stay pissed for all those days, but I don't like to talk about it right away like he does. But going through therapy, it was so wise to just say, hey, Cole, I can't talk about this right now, which he would follow me around the house and want to like talk about it if I just gave him a time frame. And I was like, what do you mean? She just said, hey, you need to tell him that you need a couple hours if you're upset, and you'll discuss it later, or you need a day, or you need something. But if you give him the time frame, then he's not going to go follow you around the house and try and get it out of you, which then we would blow up and have a fight together. She's like, you need to process it, figure out what you want to say, and then you can continue the conversation. And that was key. And I just realized that that's how we needed to communicate. And that was it just made our relationship so much easier for him to know, I need to calm down. He needs to calm down, and we're going to come back and not wait 3 days, but just give me a little bit of time. And then we could discuss it like we did in the laundry room, where we're calm.
Yeah.
And I just need that moment to walk away if I'm like upset.
I love that. That's a great nugget to share, because you got to figure out how each person communicates. And if you don't know, and you don't know how to express that, then it's going to create so many arguments and so many fights. So that's awesome that's been huge for you guys in working through that.
Yeah. And so like, we're in such a fun season right now that's why I literally told you, I think before we pressed record, that she and I were on our walk on Tuesday, and I was like, I want to tell people this journey we've been on, because it's been like a 2-year journey for me of trying to be the man she deserves. And like this last bit has been like finally the spiritual aspect of it. But it's like, I want to help relationships and couples like figure out what we've figured out the hard way. And so, kudos to you guys for hosting the show and for the hearts you have for the messaging that you're putting out there, because, I think couples that are struggling feel very alone and very lonely, and everybody projects everything on the outside on their Instagrams and everywhere else, like that everything's good. And so if your relationship is struggling, you feel like you're the only one. And there's definitely like steps and a pathway to take to hit new peaks and highs in your relationship. And I think what we were just talking about, communication and understanding communication styles, might be one of the most core pillars of a successful marriage, especially when you're very different. Like she and I, in that regard, are polar opposites. Like if something bothers me, I want to handle it immediately. And she, as we've shared, wants to push it off. And so the fact that now she'll say, I need some space, but after dinner tonight, when we put the kids to bed, let's have that conversation. That's how we communicate now. And what's really cool is we have less and less and less of that happening too, where like, I'm pissing her off less, where we don't have to have those conversations as often.
Yes. And another point that I want to mention that I noticed is you didn't tell him that he needed to change his relationship with God, and how I feel like a lot of times we're telling our spouse what they need to do to get better or how they could progress. But you didn't do that. You said, this is where I'm at, and I'm going to give you space to process it on your own and to do it at your pace. But you weren't pushing that on him to, you need to do this, you need to do that. You weren't pushing him to change to be something he wasn't in the moment. And how big that is of you, because I feel like so many times you can see the best in your partner. You can see their potential, but sometimes we can't see it ourselves. And you just gave him the opportunity to see it in himself without specifically telling him, this is what you need to do. You were able to say, this is where I'm at, and I'm going to hold space for you to process it on your own.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because that was one of the most important factors of my genuine change, is that she gave me the space, and she literally said, you're on your own journey. And she didn't say, take as long as you need, but she's like, you're on your own journey. You'll figure it out on your own time. And like, if she had given me an ultimatum, it wouldn't have been a genuine change. There might have been, I don't even know what, but so I think we
would have gotten in a fight if I would have said, I wouldn't have heard it the same. He would have been defensive.
I would have been defensive. And then if I did it, she might have thought, well, you only did it because I told you to. And is it even genuine, or are you just jumping through my hoops to make me happy? So like, I think what you just pointed out is one of the most important keys to the whole conversation was that, she's like, again, back to what we said earlier, I have a standard. I have my commitment, my walk with God. You'll never impact that. You're on your own journey. Figure it out. And, I immediately, like in that moment, changed. I guess decided to change, and then the behavior followed. But yeah, giving people the space and time is important.
I think it's so beautiful watching you guys orate everything that you've been saying. What I'm hearing is you are two very, very headstrong individuals that are on a journey together. More her. But you were on a journey together, doing it on your own path. It's almost as if you both have the coordinates to the destination on the GPS, but you're taking your own path to get there and allowing the other partner to get there in their own time frame. How amazing that is to not push each other. Prodding them, yes, but not forcing them, but just kind of tugging slowly along the way. And then number two, just how strong you two are. And on the opposite of turmoil came beauty. So far, every story you guys have relayed, it started with adversity. And on the other side of adversity was extreme beauty. So often we get stuck and do not ever want to travel through the adversity. We avoid it.
Yeah.
But it's through the adversity we become
maybe
strong.
it's I should piss you off more, because then we get better on the other side.
But learning,
probably shouldn't do that.
That is true. Like, I don't know how much time we have. I could tell you 15 more stories just like that. But like, even when we saw you guys at Limitless, I had some irritating things happen the night before at the VIP party and was a little sour. So I saw you Saturday. Friday night, we had a VIP party, and one of the persons that owes me millions of dollars was there. And it was just an irritating experience for me. And so I got a little bit grumpy. And luckily she like loved me through it. But then we had a really like important conversation Saturday morning. And as a result of a little friction, again, we weren't fighting, but like I was just not being kind. And like fixing that the next morning, we even articulated that. We said like, wow, like the fact that we had that little bump on Friday night, which we went to bed and then woke up Saturday morning and then addressed it. I feel even better and closer to you now and like happier about today, which carried to like my stage performance. Like I had pep in my step because we have this issue. So it's so true what you said. I think it's a choice, but it is going to be natural for people to have disagreements or conflict in their relationships. But if you get good at conflict resolution, I almost feel like the relationship's better on the other side. That the fact that you respectfully communicate each person's perspective and then agree to move forward, like the fact that there was a conflict gave you an opportunity to now, like, I don't know, go one rung higher on the ladder of like, you know what I'm saying, of like a successful marriage. So anyway, it's interesting that you pointed that out, Brad, because she and I kind of had that same realization at Limitless where we saw you guys. We're like, hey, it's kind of cool that I got bitter Friday night and, you know, was kind of rude to you because when I apologized for it Saturday morning, you accepted it as lovingly as you did. We're like in a better place than if it never happened at all.
I love that. Well, we know your time is valuable. And we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate you sharing your vulnerability and shedding a tear or two. We are so grateful for your example. I could go on a mountain, literal mountain of things and nuggets I've learned from you guys and your social media and what you share. It is inspiring. It is astounding. And it is something that we highly look up to. We look up to you to more ways than you can possibly fathom. I was actually talking about you guys today. And there's a slogan that we kind of have taken on as a family that actually came from you, Cole. It was when we were in Mexico. And a lot of our listeners know about my purple nail. And I told you that I was going to keep my nail forever. You and Jerome Maldonado were standing there. And you turned to me and you said, it is your obligation to become stupid rich. So you have a stupid reach. We have never forgot that. I have shared that from stages. I have shared that in thousands of conversations. And without fail, every person sits back and says, oh, whoa.
That's cool.
And that has been somewhat of a North Star for us. And so we are truly grateful for you guys and you sharing the nuggets that you've shared. Where can our listeners find you guys on social so they can support you?
Nowadays, we really only use Instagram. I don't think either of us have been on Facebook since like 2009. So I'm just my name at Cole Hatter on Instagram, and she's Sanja Hatter on Instagram. That's Sanja, like Sanja. You can just find us on Instagram, and we're pretty active there still. I check my DMs, every few days and stuff. And so, yeah, anybody that has a question or wants to reach out to us, find us on Insta, shoot us a DM.
Perfect. Well, have this conversation with your friends and your family. Like this thing, subscribe to it, download it for future listenings. Until next week, we love you guys. Bye.